This segment is about the critical or leading role with organizations. This is a really important category for certain occupations, such as occupations in design, and possibly less so for occupations in the fine arts. You have to prove that you have a leading, starring, or critical role with organizations that have a distinguished reputation. There are actually two parts of this. You have to show that you have had a critical role in the past, and you have to prove that you will have this relationship with organizations in the future during your visa application. There's two parts to documenting the critical role. We normally break this out by a letter of recommendation from an expert who is in that organization to describe the critical role, and the second part is supporting material to demonstrate that critical role. Depending on the occupation, this can be very, very important. I'll give you an example of occupations. If you are a designer and you've worked for a company for a period of time, the letter from the employer can really be instrumental in documenting your critical role. If you are a photographer or even a designer, sometimes you can get a letter from your client to document that you've had an impact with their organization, either with the design or with a campaign. If you're an artist, you can have an art gallery in the home country or in some instances in the United States that can document the artist's leading or critical role with that gallery. So those are essentially letters which describe the critical role, and then there are supporting materials that supplement that letter. It's possible that you could have press about the artist or the designer to describe the campaign or what the person did. But a lot of times this is really the section of an application where a designer would put in portfolio materials to demonstrate that critical role. So if they prepared a brand identity or a logo or something to that effect, there's not necessarily going to be press about the designer preparing that material, but there can be a letter from that the company that commissioned them to describe their critical role, and then you can show that material. So this is really the best spot in a visa application to show your portfolio. There's often confusion with my clients about the difference between a critical role letter and a significance letter. I'm going to talk about a significance letter next, but I'll just take a minute here to try to explain the difference so that people have more of an idea of what a critical role letter is. So there's really two main parts of a visa application where you can have a letter that documents what an alien did. One part is the significance category. This is really a letter from an expert talking about the credentials of the artist overall. You're talking about all of the things that they've accomplished. In the purpose of the critical role, we want to focus on what an artist or designer did with a specific organization. So the emphasis on the critical role is what did the artist do with a particular organization, and the letter comes from that organization. And that's really the key to the critical role. I just want to mention one additional thing that relates to the critical role category. There are instances where evidence is redundant, and what that means is that you would use the same evidence in different parts of an application. If you have a situation where, for example, an artist had an important role in an exhibition, there's a possibility that you would get a letter from the gallery to describe the critical role of the artist with that organization, and there's also a possibility that that letter could document the artist's leading role in an event. So there's a possibility that you could have the same event and it could be documented two different places in a visa application. This is something that immigration is okay with and actually they favor, and so that's something that the artist needs to discuss with the attorney. But there are instances where you have one event that can really be critical and you can put it into a lot of different places in an application. An example would be if an artist receives a prize, that's evidence of the prize category. You can have an article about that prize, and that could be published material about that prize or about the artist. And you can also have evidence of an event. If there was some sort of presentation of that prize, there's a possibility that the person had a leading role in that event. So there's a lot of things that you have to look at in each event that someone achieves to determine where you would put that in the visa application.